Welcome to OBR Live Lockdown Edition. As we said on Monday, today we're going to be, and every Wednesday we're going to be looking to talk to different people who are working in the motorsport industry, sponsors of the team, friends of the team, to bring in a bit of perspective and interesting ideas about how things are at the moment and how we can all learn something at these slightly crazy times, of course. So today we're really excited to bring in Steve Faulks. So Steve is been a sponsor of OBR for around 2.5 seasons now. And Steve runs a company called Tune the Team, who were really our first kind of human performance partner that we'd worked with. And Steve has taught us a lot in already the 2 years he's worked with the team. And we're really excited to have him here today. So thank you very much, Steve, for joining. So Steve, I thought it might be good to just kick off with you telling us a little bit about your story, how you've got to where you are today, and then Tune the Team itself, and what you guys do.
By trade, I suppose I'm a professional pilot, an airline pilot, and I teach there as well. So I teach a range of people from people who are brand new to flying big jets, all the way through to people who've been flying for a very long time, lots of experience as part of their personal development. So these ideas, the behavioural and the cognitive skills that I coach with you guys and with other people have stemmed really from that in the aerospace world.
And how did you when was it that you started to realise the similarities and the transfer of ideas that could be brought from aerospace into motorsport, which has been a passion of yours for a long time?
Yeah, well, I've just been interested, I suppose, and motorsport is very much a team sport, a lot of focus on the drivers traditionally, but I think increasingly these days with particularly the size of teams as well, and the organisation involved in producing top level performances from very complex cars in complex environments, in very dynamic environments. It's definitely something which became apparent fairly quickly that this stuff could really help.
Okay, great. So as we go on today, if you guys watching at home, so we've got already 32 people watching, which is great, stick some questions in the comments box and we'll try to get through as many as possible. We have a few questions for Steve, so whether you're in OBR, not in OBR, or interested in some of the learnings that Steve's applying into the motorsport industry with OBR, but also with your customers that you work with, stick them in the comments box and we'll try to get to them. So Steve, you wanted to talk today a bit about motivation, right, and also innovation. So out of interest for you, when you first got involved with OBR, what was the thinking about that, and why then following on from that do you think innovation is such a core part of motorsport and what it's all about?
Well, I got involved with OBR really because as much as a kind of a test in a way, I was very aware that what I knew would work in a very dynamic trackside environment. But what I wanted to find out was whether it would work, how well it would work really in an office-based design environment or in that kind of, in that time critical but less dynamic, I suppose, in some ways, certainly, environment. So at Oxford Brookes, I spoke to the Autosport show, spoke to you guys there, and were welcomed with open arms, really, which was lovely, and some lovely open minds as well. And it's been enormously entertaining and a lot of fun.
And that environment back at the factory, if you will, that's really where the innovation happens. And while it doesn't always get the limelight, that's where most of the gains, you could argue, let's say 70%, 80% of the gains can be made at the beginning of the season to set out really what your chances are.
Absolutely, and of course that innovation never ever stops, particularly in motorsport, and it's been held up by other industries. I think other industries have realised how good motorsport are at innovating and the speed at which that can be done. So it's an important skill for everyone to learn, really. And I think in the environment we find ourselves in today, it's a matter of survival for a lot of companies, and also some huge opportunities out there in the changing behaviours, perhaps, of people as time goes on.
And we've really seen the power of that motorsport innovation at the moment, haven't we, in terms of the Ventilator Challenge UK, lots of the work being done. People have really turned to motorsport because of that innovation and the speed of working kind of combined, I guess, which motorsport and also the companies kind of associated with motorsport have been able to apply to the problem. So, Steve, what do you think it is that sets up a team for innovation, and you think is separates one team from another that are both trying to effectively do the same goal?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? So there we go. IT, we have new lessons in IT happening all the time. Yeah, so we're familiar with the idea of innovation. I think everybody is. New ideas, creative thoughts, and so on. But it's also we don't innovations that aren't successful are no good to anybody. So we have to make the right choices as we go through that process of innovating. Steve Jobs, great quote from him. I'm as proud of the many things we haven't done as the things we have done. Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. So he really understands that it's about making good choices along the way. So in a way, it's an adaptation of a decision-making process, looking for a unique solution. So you can set out with that in mind, and to remove perhaps some of the luck, I suppose, involved, or to make your process more efficient. We can build on our good understanding that we've all talked about with lots of books as well, a good understanding of our decision-making processes, with a few extra considerations. So those, I would suggest, well, apply largely to our analytical decision-making process. So the one we use if we decided perhaps this is a bigger decision, another decision. We make thousands of decisions every day. I think we all know.
Yeah.
So this is a process that we might apply to some of the bigger ones, perhaps as a group.
And how? Carry on. Sorry.
No, that's right.
So one of the things I was wondering is obviously having a good decision-making process is crucial, and like you said, the analytical decision-making process. But in a motorsport team, pressure can be quite high, and the speed can be pretty fast that people are working at. So how do you see those two things working together, and how specifically do you make sure you apply that in motorsport where the pressure's on?
I think we need to understand that there are different types of decision, and they are all different types of decision-making process, and they're all appropriate under different circumstances. This would be a process that I'm talking about now, ideally, where you have a bit of time to think. Now, you can speed it up a bit, but ultimately, innovation itself is going to require individuals to have a bit of time to mull things over, I suppose, to contemplate. That will really help. Good ideas do come on your own. There's no doubt about that. Adrian Newey in his book talks about sitting on aeroplanes and having that moment of peace and that to cogitate and think of new things. That moment of clarity, if you like. Research varies a bit, I have to be honest. General consensus is that small groups work best. 7 people is a number I've heard bandied around. 7 or less seems to be the general consensus, preferably with a range of experience and background. That way, if you've got more than one person there, you don't fall foul of some of the cognitive biases that we are all very susceptible to. So it's a good idea to have more than one person on it, and a small group works best. Variety of experience and background definitely helps. Experience itself in the particular field that you're making, that you're innovating in, doesn't necessarily help. What you need is experience and inexperience. So you need both. Different backgrounds help draw ideas from different parts of life, because innovation does come. You can transfer ideas from one part of life to another. Dyson famously did that. That's the first. I suppose that's the first step, is getting that group together.
Okay.
Defining the problem is the second step. Ask people to think of ideas before they come to the meeting. Go away and have a think first. That's key. It'd be a good idea at that point to emphasise the importance of an open culture, and to be wary of attaching any self-worth or personal capital to your own ideas, because this is not a competition. We're not trying to win this as a group of people. What we're trying to do is come up with the best idea between us. So that's a really key point, and something that I think a lot of groups do fall foul of. So meet together and expand those ideas. So put your suggestions forward, expand them. There's no such thing as a bad idea at this point. The experience of members, as I said, can help, but that can also limit thinking. So if you've got very experienced people, they can shut down an avenue of thinking, perhaps, that could lead to something further down the line that hasn't been realised so far. So it's important to be very open about this. Try to keep going with option generation. It's reasonably well researched, this, that the first, you're going to find a workable solution in the first three ideas that you're going to get. Go beyond that. Option generation is an iterative process, so it's important to keep going beyond those initial ideas and keep pushing, and eventually you'll get further and further from the original ideas, and that's when you'll start to innovate. So make a note of all those, and maybe go away and have a think at that point. Now, maybe give it a day, maybe later in the same day, but you need to have time to go and mull those ideas over, then come back together, meet again, and choose a small number now of the best options to look at more closely. Perhaps you could use a matrix as you're very familiar with the factors that you've chosen to balance the options, and then go from there. And then that process also helps recording the risks and benefits, which we've talked about as well, of each of those options and the final option that you choose. And then those risks and benefits can be used later down the line by the departments during manufacture or at your operation.
Okay. So I guess in a motorsport team, you can almost get caught up with the pace and the pressure, but actually what it sounds like from what you're saying is that having the time to kind of independently think things over and mull over ideas, but then also to have the time to keep pushing you to make more the option generation process, to not just say after one or two ideas, right, we need to move forwards, but then you may effectively miss out some of the slightly more interesting ideas that are almost a few layers behind that, right?
Yeah, you have to decide whether you're here to innovate or whether you're here to make a workable solution. And you can push it as far as or as not far as you like, really, to come up with the blend that you desire. The flip side, I suppose, of all of this is that it's very easy to have a team that creates barriers, if you like, barriers to innovation. So it's very easy to prevent it happening, just as easy it is to create an environment where it can happen. So Harvard Business Review did a survey of 270 corporate leaders who felt that the largest two obstacles to innovation were company politics and cultural issues within the company. So all of the work we have done looking at open culture really helps with innovation. It needs this healthy open culture to value the input of inexperienced people, make sure ideas are not constrained. More radical ideas don't get thrown out really easily, and perhaps even awkward truths that people don't really want to speak about or would be frowned upon in certain parts of the organisation can be spoken, can be aired. Another great Steve Jobs quote: sometimes when you innovate, you make mistakes. It's best to admit them quickly and get on with improving your other innovations. So you have to have this open, trusting and honest culture within your team or within your organisation in order to make this truly work effectively, which I know it's all very well following the process perhaps that I've talked about in other research, but unless you have that culture as part of your organisation, it's really not going to generate the results you want.
So basically it starts from the culture, and then effectively within that you then have a process which effectively allows people to, if you're wanting to innovate, that is, to have the space and the time and the process in place to give people that chance to innovate and voice those, and not feel that the culture effectively is suppressing that, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. And I think in the current environment, that is going to be harder to maintain because personal contact isn't really there, and those personal relationships which form the foundation of of that open culture in terms of trust and honesty and having a good working relationship with your colleagues is going to be harder. So I think making use of technology and allowing ourselves perhaps time at the beginning of meetings just to chat, just to, to maintain that level of personal contact and personal interest is really important.
And is there anything, before we move on to the next topic, and then get to some questions at the end, is there anything specifically for Formula student teams that you think is important in terms of innovation and the way that those things are applied in a Formula student setting, which surely is a little bit different to a corporate setting, for example?
To be honest with you, from what I've seen, it's not a huge difference. Particularly with Oxford Brookes, it's run as an incredibly professional team. And I genuinely believe that the lessons and the processes and the way of working, if you like, as well, that you learn at Oxford Brookes, that you pick up as you go, is very similar. So really, in terms of Formula student teams, no, I think it's just important to be aware of our own, the level to which our own behaviour affects the team performance, I think, is probably the biggest starting point. And everything else follows from there.
To have that awareness, like almost external awareness. Okay. I think it's called mentalism, isn't it? The ability to kind of realise how you're feeling rather than just actually feeling it yourself effectively, yes, and almost see objectively your impact on your surroundings, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, and then I guess the other topic you wanted to talk about today, so motivation. I think it's quite obvious, but why did you want to talk about this at the moment?
It's tough, I think, for everybody. A lot of people are finding, and I know, obviously I'm in touch with you guys regularly, all the time really, and it's difficult. I think when your overarching goal of competing at a Formula student competition, in this case, effectively disappears, it's incredibly hard to keep motivated, because bearing in mind there's still an awful lot of value that you can add to what it is to the team, and obviously next year and so on. So it's tough motivating yourself under circumstances like this, and I think a lot of people are going to find the same.
So how do you think at the moment, what are some of the key ways you think a team can set itself up to keep and then also keep individuals motivated during this time? What are some of the key kind of processes and things that we can all start to try and implement ourselves?
I think it's important to set right at the beginning. I think there's a level of expectation if we're looking to go into top level motorsport, and that's where we are at Oxford Brookes, obviously. There's an expectation there that there's an awful lot of motivation that's going to come from the individual. The organisation doesn't really see the need to motivate people at that level. There's a great Channel 4 got Toto Wolff and Gareth Southgate together a while back now, I think, and in that Gareth Southgate quoted Arsene Wenger: "If I have a player that needs motivating, then they're in the wrong place." And Toto Wolff very much agreed with that. They said they saw their part of their role as being to provide an environment where a high performance and professionalism is normal, and also to avoid things that are demotivating, but not necessarily to motivate their employees. They expect that to come very much from the people as well as the environment they're working in.
So I guess when you're building your team, finding those people and smelling that motivation is an important thing.
Yeah, and I think it's an important thing for the members of Formula student teams certainly to realise, is that they're going into a world which is, they know this it's tough, but now is a real test of how much they want it, I suppose. So it's worth being aware of that drive and searching for it. Two types of motivation, generally speaking: intrinsic and extrinsic. So extrinsic comes from outside, intrinsic comes from within us, broadly speaking. So that's it. Obviously, the extrinsic motivators, things like the competition itself. Don't lose sight of that. Still very much still important. In fact, I was reading this morning, Street Drone, another great supporter of Formula Student, is playing an important role in enabling the virtual autonomous competition to go ahead. And that's got just as much value to all as the competition in person, arguably, in that environment. So we've also got Oxford Brookes Racing, very much, we talk about this a lot, we're part of a legacy, and that ongoing legacy we have a responsibility to, and there'll be a huge amount of impact that work done now will have on next year's car, and that's true in any organisation as well. Any organisation has its own legacy and its own internal learning as an organisation. So we all have a responsibility towards that too. Survey we did with the leads. I don't know if you remember this one, Joe. We did a survey with the team leads within Oxford Brookes as well. That showed some interesting results. One of them was competing against the rules itself. So not necessarily competing against other competitors, but actually producing a car that does the best within the rules was a huge motivator for the team leads. And I thought that was really interesting. So that is still very much there as a competition. So obviously we can't really replace all of the extrinsic motivators, but it may be possible to replace some of them with others. And understanding your team members and their own internal motivations will definitely help with that. Hopefully you've done a lot of work in your organisation with aligning team goals with individual goals anyway. Times like this make that work frustrating, because obviously you've done a lot of work, someone's moved the goalposts, now we have to do it again, but it's worth it. It is really worth it, just to get those people up and running again.
So how's a good way for any of us individually to go and set new goals, right? Because motivation, like you said, it often does derive from those goals that we have for ourselves or for our team. So do you have a kind of a good way of yourself setting new goals? Because surely even in your life's probably changed in the last couple of few weeks.
Yeah, I think that's a very general question, I think, for everybody. It's quite a big one. From a personal perspective, I suppose I look at what is just about possible or just beyond reach, and try and look at what's possible extrinsically and try and align my own internal goals with that and find a path that way. So for me, it's very much about aligning intrinsic motivation with extrinsic goals. And there's an awful lot spoken about intrinsic motivation, to be honest. Motivation for it's quite difficult to change your own intrinsic motivations. Effort in that direction can be quite slow to change behaviour within a team, certainly, but the rewards are huge. So it is very well worth sitting down with your team members and saying, look, what is it that motivates you as an individual? And this is kind of how I would work with myself. What is it that motivates me? What do I want to do? And how can I make that fit with what I think is possible and where the opportunities are? So I think the problem in times like this, when we're remote working, is actually then having the drive to get up and do that when we're working in different physical environments. So obviously less social interaction, and studies have shown that people will do some quite boring things or things that they find are mundane if there is social interaction involved in it. If there's more interaction, then they just enjoy the task more, even though the task itself may not interest them that much. There are lots of different ideas in terms of motivation for individual tasks amongst people, and this came up in the survey as well. Variety of the skills involved, the significance of the task as well to the organisation, that matters to people. How much learning, that was a big intrinsic motivator for our team leads. So the thing is that learning has to be appropriate, so we need to find an appropriate difficulty of task to go with that individual, and then the motivation from inside is huge. Level of autonomy as well, things like that, feedback, things like that make a big difference. And again, tougher in this environment, but it's important that as leaders or as members of the team, that we support each other to give people feedback and to be involved, to give the appropriate level of autonomy and so on, which is harder but not impossible, just requires a bit more effort, thought.
That ties quite nicely into one of the questions. Are you okay to move on to the question section now?
Absolutely, yeah.
So one question that we got from Rafnan said, what advice would you give for the inexperienced team members, for example, to step forward and bring ideas to more experienced people within a team, basically? Because that can be quite daunting, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Hopefully, the comments I made earlier about the value of inexperience ring true with people involved in teamwork. There is a huge value to inexperience. Experience itself is a double-edged sword. It can lead you to sort of tramline thinking, not coming up with new ideas and being stuck in your ways. There are some downsides to it in terms of cognitive biases that don't exist for inexperienced people. Experience is a very task-specific thing as well. So just because you feel you are an inexperienced person in that area doesn't mean to say you don't have relevant experience that can be brought in from elsewhere as well. So I would suggest that you just continue to be as open as possible with your teammates, really. Be honest. Humility is good for anyone, any teammate, whether experienced or inexperienced. And hopefully you will be able to foster a culture and encourage a culture where you are listened to regardless of experience. And an openness to learning will definitely help that as well.
Okay. Another question we got, just more general. So, will we be saving this video to our story after? Yes, we are going to be adding it to Instagram TV at some point soon after this, and maybe we'll also kind of pull out some of the key points from what Steve's been talking about today. Because I think one thing that we've definitely noticed as a team is, actually, if you kind of consciously at first it has to be a conscious effort to apply some of these principles that you talk about that may seem obvious, but actually without kind of thinking about it at first, you have to go out of your way to do so. But eventually they kind of become habit, and as part of the process you go about conducting your everyday activities, right?
Yeah, it is tough. Behavior change is tough. It's hard, and it's hard for an organization because obviously that's lots of individuals all trying to do the same thing. So it isn't easy. The rewards are massive. Mercedes and Toto Wolff are standout examples of what happens when you apply this relentlessly and put words into actions as well. And the success they've achieved is, in my view, down to this cultural ability to have this open culture. Behavior change is tough, but it's worth it.
Final thing, unless we get any other key questions in. So I guess, Steve, during your last 2.5 years seeing the workings of a formal student team, I guess what are some of the main things that have, let's say, stood out for you, either positive or negative, that you think probably, my guess is a good 2/3 of the people watching right now are in other formal student teams. So, what are some of the kind of key things that you think any formal student team now, maybe top 3 things should try and apply from what you've seen?
I think from working with Oxford Brookes, the one thing that we usually the place we end up coming back to is we talk about a lot of concepts and ideas which are reasonably advanced, as you say. Some seem obvious, but applying them is difficult. But we often come back to just the ability to have good, healthy, personal working relationships with your team members, and to be open and honest with them, and to be able to have those adult conversations that are so necessary in order to progress with decisions and to communicate clearly in thoughts and ideas. So that's the first one, I would say. The second one, I think, is the workload, which is an obvious one, which I know you'll sympathise with, dissertation on Friday.
Don't mention it.
It's tough. It's really tough, and I've been nothing but impressed by what I've seen in terms of the amount of effort and dedication that the team members apply. It is very much worth it. The development in skills of non-technical skills that Formula Student offers is immense. I mean, it was. I've got 1 second. I've got some figures here. I think 93% of it was a LinkedIn survey. 93% of respondents said that they valued soft skills more than hard skills. So it is incredibly important, the value that Formula Student brings to you as a future employee, or as a future member of another team. even though it's incredibly hard work and frustrating, and there'll be long nights. But that's motorsport too.
Okay. Final questions, not quite as related to what we've been talking about. So Oxford Brookes is offering an automotive and electric vehicles course. Is this course related to OBR specifically? Is there any specific connections? So, but not directly, but the idea is that you apply your knowledge and the theory from the classroom to Oxford Brookes Racing, and the better you can do that and also learn from Oxford Brookes Racing and feed that back into your university studies, the better. So no, there's no kind of formal connection, but the two are intrinsically interlinked. I think that's it. Is there anything last things you'd like to say, Steve, before we wrap it up?
It's been great. No, thank you very much, Joe. It's been good to speak to you as well.
Yeah, likewise.
Albeit over distance.
Is there any way that people should keep in touch with you, follow you on LinkedIn, websites, anything like that? What's the best way to keep in touch with the team and yourself and ask more questions?
I am on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. LinkedIn, I probably look at more than the others, but nevertheless, I look at all of them every day. So if anybody's interested, please don't hesitate to get in touch. We can always speak further. I have a bit of time on my hands at the moment.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks very much, Steve. And make sure you guys check Steve out on social media, add him, and it's always helpful, and we'll help you out. Though we don't want you to give too many other teams too much of an advantage, so keep it to a limit. All right. Cool. All right. Thanks very much, guys, and thanks for tuning in to everyone at home. Take care. Bye.
Bye.